Alright, so I am fairly certain at this point that I was right, and that my lack of interest in the last couple of Amphibia episodes was due to my lack of enthusiasm regarding the settings of those episodes. As this episode, Quarreler's Pass, the first of this week's 2 episodes, was similar in a lot of ways, and yet I really liked this one a lot. Just like the last couple of episodes, it introduced conflicts that kind of come out of nowhere. Suddenly, Sprig and Polly are quarreling, as the name of the episode would suggest, and apparently they've been doing this for the entire trip so far, even though, while we have sometimes seen them come to conflict, we have never seen them straight up constantly arguing. Also, there's some stuff said here at the start of this episode which blatantly contradicts stuff that was shown to us previously this season. We are flat out told through dialogue between Anne and Hop Pop that they're making good time and that the trip has gone smoother than they expected, neither of which is true. So, already the setup for this episode just comes out of nowhere. But it's still absolutely hilarious when Anne and Hop Pop decide to drop Sprig and Polly off at the titular Quarreler's Pass, a dangerous pass to be taken on foot, where those traveling it will have to work together in order to make it to the other end. But it does meet back up with the main road, so long as they don't die excruciating and gruesome deaths, they'll be able to rejoin the rest of their party later. And obviously they shouldn't have left kids to go and take a super dangerous passage on their own, but I certainly get the compulsion. I don't even have kids, but I spend enough time in cars with kids to know that sometimes you just want to dump them off somewhere. So that was already pretty funny, but it was even funnier seeing Sprig and Polly immediately start to work together flawlessly, and both out of spite, and like they told us in the episode, because they do want to make it back to the flagon so they can stick it to Anne and Hop Pop, but also because when push comes to shove, they work together very well. The entire family does. And the juxtaposition of that, of them doing so well so immediately, with Anne and Hop Pop realizing they don't know how to be alone together, and coming to a different sort of conflict over that, was just absolutely hysterical. And I even really loved how the villain of the episode, or villains I guess, it's a two-headed worm with one head at each end, a la cat dog. Each head, the two heads are siblings. One's female, one's male, and they're siblings. And the worm is blind. The worms are blind, but they can hear really well. I really liked how the talent that Sprig and Polly have apparently always had to do perfect impressions of voices was used to turn the two sibling worm heads against each other so that Sprig and Polly could escape. Because not only did they use that talent that they've apparently always had, which was well set up at the beginning of the episode, at the very least, right? But their knowledge of how siblings can grate on each other in order to accomplish this and defeat the enemy. And in the end, they do agree to be better to each other for a while, if not for their own sakes, then for the sake of Anne and Hop Pop. Good episode, good, overall fun, funny little, I won't say fluffy, because there was a giant man-eating worm, or a pair of giant, I don't know how you want to look at the worm, is it one or two? I don't know, I don't care. I won't say fluffy, but still felt kind of fluffy. Little random filler episode with some fantastic deadpan humor all throughout it, mostly from Sprig, of course. Very good episode. I certainly hope the second of these episodes is just as good. I actually haven't watched it yet. I'm going to check it out right now, actually, I think. Just going to bring this up. I'm expecting another funny filler, right? Oh, that's not filler. That's certainly not filler at all. It's much more interesting. The second of these 2 episodes, we leave the family behind completely and focus on Sasha and Grime again for the first time this season. I really wasn't expecting to see them again until they came to conflict with the planters. But sure, I'm all for this. I'm all for following them in some limited capacity, just like we did last season, checking in occasionally on what they're up to. And it turns out what they're up to is Grime only has 2 soldiers left, and they're nothing special, aside from Sasha, obviously. And he's been disgraced, and I'll talk about that in a minute, because it's super interesting. And also, Sasha has continued her training this entire time, attacking dummies of the planters that reminded me, for some reason, specifically of the Melon Lord dummy from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I've been thinking about that show. Because I am going to be doing a review series on it relatively soon. I'm starting that probably next week, I hope. Meanwhile, though, Grime has been letting himself go, sitting around in a little cabin with his wanted poster on the door that they've been throwing knives at. I thought that was a cute touch. And watching, it looked like a Lost parody on Sasha's phone, which I thought was cute because we had seen similar stuff with the planters in season 1. And Sasha keeps trying to get him to get off his butt and train more because she's worried that somebody's going to come to try to collect the bounty. But he's pretty disinterested in it. Even when those last 2 remaining soldiers under Sasha's direction pose as assassins, he still doesn't even bother getting up and trying to fight. It really seems like he's slipped, because Grime, while he's definitely an antagonist, was never really an unlikable character. But there's a reason for all this. Back in town, this new soldier shows up. I remember she's a general, but I don't quite remember her name, which seems strange for some reason. I feel like I should remember her name. But anyway, she shows up, and she's very competent, and she's specifically after Grime for reasons that, again, I'll touch on in a minute. And she is a member of the Newtopian military. And since our main cast is heading to Newtopia right now, I expect we're going to be seeing a lot more of her going forward, which I'm all for. She was very entertaining, very funny character, very full of herself. Kind of manic in a psychopath kind of way. So interesting. And at first, Sasha and Grime don't even bother trying to fight her because with 2 swipes of her little claw weapon thingies, she cuts down Anne's dummies and the trees behind them, which weren't even in the reach of her weapon. It's totally an anime kind of move. It was really, really cool. The animation in this episode was just fantastic in general. I just want to get that out in the open right away. And so they run, but they come to a cliff, and as they're running, we get to see all over again how good of friends these 2 characters are and how well they complement each other. Because Grime straight up calls Sasha out for the real reason why she's training so hard. He's able to recognize where she isn't, or hasn't been able to yet, I guess is a better way to say it, that she's training so hard to distract herself from the fact that she did lose Anne. Or at the very least, she feels like she lost Anne as a friend forever because of what happened back at the tower. And he definitely understands her. And in understanding that much, he proves that he understands her. But he's not entirely right. He's read into it quite a bit, but she reveals that that's not the only reason she's been training so hard. It's also because she's worried about losing another friend, namely him. And he gets it. He gets why she cares so much about him falling out of practice, let's say. So the 2 of them stand and fight together, and they're able to defeat this soldier working together. It was a very cool moment. I like these characters a lot. I definitely feel like they're gonna get redemption arcs, make the switch from antagonists to protagonists at some point. They have that sense to them. More so now than ever, because while Grime does say he's going to raise an army and try to take Newtopia, I definitely feel like being against Newtopia puts him in the same camp as our protagonist, because he mentions at one point that he's been branded a traitor, or Sasha mentions it to him. It's mentioned. I don't remember specifically who says what dialogue, but it's mentioned in this episode that he was branded a traitor by Newtopia, because he was part of the Newtopian military, technically. I guess it's a royal military that stretches out from Newtopia across the entirety of Amphibia. but he was branded a traitor because he lost control of the valley. And if the toads at that tower were unsympathetic and antagonists because they were in control of the valley, then the people who put them in control of the valley in the first place and blamed them when they lost control would be antagonists too, right? They'd be at odds with our heroes too, right? So I think that was there to imply to us, I guess is the best way to put it, that the planters are walking into a very bad situation right now. I also thought it was interesting in this episode that whenever we saw Sasha's sword, it had that reddish-pink glow to it. It's not even a glow, it was just colored reddish-pink, rather than the regular, like, steely gray that we saw in the teaser trailer, and that we see every time an episode starts in the opening of each episode. So I'm wondering if this was a coloring mistake, or the stuff from that other stuff was a coloring mistake, and it's just never that steely gray color. Or if Sasha's constantly using her powers, assuming that she has powers, because her eyes didn't light up, at least as far as I could see, at all during her fight with General What's-Her-Name. I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to get at is I'm wondering if the persistent reddish-pink color of Sasha's sword means anything. And if it does mean something, what does it mean? I don't know yet. I'm trying to piece it together. This show's just super interesting to me. I don't know, these episodes were both fantastic for very different reasons. The first because it was a very fun and fluffy, primarily comedy-driven episode, and the second one because it furthers the plot. I think more so than the episode implies that it does on the surface. If that little hint about Newtopia being an undesirable place, let's say, is true and I'm correct about it. And quite frankly, I hope we get more asides to Sasha and Grime sooner rather than later. They were very entertaining here, and it was nice, as much as I like the planters, and Anne, I'm counting Anne among the planters, obviously, in case you guys hadn't noticed. As much as I like following their adventures, getting a break from them was very nice, too. It was very welcome, too. All of that said, though, guys, what did you guys think of Quarreler's Pass and Toadcatcher, if you have seen them? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over in my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.